Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. Can everybody see the Kansas 911 Coordinating Council web portal being displayed on your, with the username and password displayed on your screen?
Yes. Yeah.
All righty, great. Okay, I'm going to ask everybody to mute your phone. If you have any questions as we're going through there, jot them down. With this many of us on the bridge, if we're not muted, we're going to get a lot of background noise and nobody's going to be able to hear. And with this many people trying to ask questions as we go, it's going to become horrendously confusing. So if you have a question, jot it down. When we finish up, then we'll go back and take questions from everybody as we go. Thank you all for joining on the call. I think this expenditure reporting tool on the web portal, once you get used to it, I think it's going to be very, very much similar to what you were doing on the spreadsheet. It's just going to make it so much easier for the operations committee to do their review. Before we were getting in 117 individual spreadsheets, and in order to review those expenditures, we had to go in and copy those all into a compilation of the expenditures. We were missing expenditures. It was just a mess. So hopefully this doing it into a database where we can manipulate the records to create that compilation will make life easier for all of us. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Eileen. She's going to walk us through the entire portal, or the expenditure reporting on the aspect of the portal. And as we go through there, I'll kind of jump in here and there to define what the information we're looking at in some of the fields is, but for the most part, Eileen's just going to take it and run with it. So go ahead, Eileen.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So I'm Eileen Battles. I'm a GS project manager here at DASC, which is the Data Access and Support Center. I also have in the room with me Kelly Emmons, who's a developer who actually did all the work on the portal, so all the interface and the behind-the-scenes database things. Kelly's the genius behind it. I just tell her, hey, this is what we want, and then she puts it all together. And then we also have Ken Nelson, who's the manager of DASC, in the room as well, who you probably know Ken. We do a lot of work with the NextGen 911 project on the GIS side of things. So we've been heavily involved in the remediation, the GIS data remediation, as well as working on the Vesta locate templates for those on the state network, getting those ready. So anything regarding the GIS side, we've been heavily involved in. So the council came to us one time and said we would like to put together a portal for managing a lot of the 911 content that's coming through for NextGen. So we've been adding different modules to it as needed. I'll be demoing the expenditures module today. Another thing we're using the portal for is accepting GIS data maintenance updates through the portal. So this is just one piece of it. There's several things the portal is being used for right now, but I thought we'll just dive into expenditures and kind of focus on that at this time. So you should be seeing the portal homepage, which the web address is up there at the top. It's portal.kansas911.org. And you should have received that in an email from Scott as well, that URL to this homepage. So it's pretty plain, the homepage, on purpose, because since this is a lot of content that's dependent on access privileges, you have to actually register and log in before you gain access to any of the content on the portal. So many of you have registered already, but I wanted to go through that first. So before you can even log in, username or password, you first have to register for an account. So I thought we'd go through those steps first. It's pretty much just like any other registration you've probably gone through. It's basic, first name, last name, your contact information. We ask you to check which PSAPs you represent. we realize most of you represent one, but there are some out there that represent more than one PSAP, so be sure and select all the PSAPs you represent. And the next thing it asks is for a username. And so this is something you decide on. And you might want to, when you register, you might want to actually jot this down because this will be the username you use to actually log into the portal. So it's whatever you want, anything between 6 to 20 characters, something easy to remember, just, kind of a common use term there works good. Continuing through registration, you'll also see there's something called NG911 role. If one of these roles are applicable to your job title or role with 911, go and select it. But if none of the roles there are applicable to what you do, you can just leave it blank. We have those roles in there because there's certain pieces of the portal that, dependent on their role, they have access to different modules. So that's kind of what the role piece is. That's why we have role, but we also have title. So if you don't find a role that's applicable, just go ahead after you do your organization, type in your title there. So we'll catch it either way, depending on which one you fit in. And then the rest of it's just basic contact information: work phone, cell phone, your email address. The important thing to note here is the email address is kind of tied to your username. So let's say you register, and then you're like, oh, I can't remember if I registered. Should I register again? If you try to register again, it won't let you use the same email password or the same email twice. So it's just kind of one registration with the email. But if something needs to change with that, you can contact us, and we can help you through that. And then, of course, your address, city, zip, state. And then some important check boxes toward the end of the registration. First thing is, we envision the portal being a communication tool and enabling us to better send out mass updates or emails with information NextGen 911 related. So we put this on here for the GIS side of things. Everyone from the GIS side is required to register at least one user from each PSAP to report updates. So we thought, well, this will be handy. Once you're registered, we'll be able to send out mass emails through the portal on any updates we have regarding GIS. So if you want to be notified of those, just click that box. And then also, the one we're talking about today asks, will you be submitting expenditure reports? So be sure and click that so we know that you will be doing that, and then we get notified of that. So then just click register. And so after that, it pretty much just tells you thank you for registering. An important thing I want to note there is after each registration, the 911 administrator, or in this case Michelle for expenditures, has to approve the registrations before you're granted access to the portal. And part of that was just a little bit of a security feature to make sure we weren't just getting some spam users or unknown users registering on the portal. So there is a little bit of a delay. Once you register, someone has to actually go in and approve you. So if you don't immediately get an email, just know you will. Within usually a couple hours, you'll get a response. The important thing about the email is that it will contain your password. So the password is an automatically generated encrypted password, and that's another security feature. So so we can't actually look up your password for you. It's by being encrypted, it's off limits to us as well. So if you get that email or you forget your password, or whatever happens, you can always go back in here and click on this reset your password here, and that'll allow you, just by inputting your first name, last name, your username, and your email address, will generate a new password for you. So you can't actually control what your password is, since it's kind of a security feature, since it's encrypted, but if you forget it or that one's not working for you, you can always generate a new one as well. So just wanted to kind of emphasize those couple things, because I know when you get registered, you're like, okay, I'm going to log in, but there's a little delay there. You've got to wait for that email containing that password before you can actually log in. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and log in, and thank you to Chris Cooper of Hutchinson, Reno County, because I'm going to be Chris today, because I wanted to show some real content when I did the demo. instead of I kind of have admin privileges, so what I show you wouldn't make sense. So I thought, well, I'll just be Chris today for the demo. So just type in your new username and password and hit submit. And then you'll see once you log into the portal, there's different menus available. So today we're going to focus on the admin expenditures. So just click on admin and expenditures. And you'll see the different tabs come up where you can enter expenditures. And Scott, we're going to start at revenue and balance. And did you want to, before I go into the actual functionality of it, did you want to say anything about the content there?
Yeah, I will. The various fields, the 911 fund balance, that is a calculated field. You won't enter anything there. Interest is where you include any interest that was paid on your 911 fund account. You just enter that amount in there. The Pre-911 Act landline fund, that is for PSAPs that segregated their money. So if you kept your money separate before 2012, the money that you collected before 2012, if you kept that in a separate account and then started putting the money you received after January 1st of 2012, then you have pre-911 Act money. If you lumped all that money into the same account, so after January 1st you just started depositing that money in with the money you already had on hand, then you don't have any pre-911 Act money. But if you kept those separate, you entered your fund balances for the pre-911 landline, pre-911 Act wireless in that second box, and then your current year's receipts in that third field. Then the fourth box there, other reimbursement. If you get money for 911 from any other source, or if you have to reimburse your 911 account for a prior year's expenditure that was found not to be allowable, then that is what goes in that field. Hopefully that's clear. If your pre-911 Act money is combined, landline and wireless is combined in one account, then just enter the total of that amount in the landline balance up above. Okay, I think that does it. Eileen, go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. So I was just going to go through and actually enter some revenue and balance, just some pretend totals for now, just so you can see the functionality and some features that pop up. So the first thing, once you are on the tab you want to be, so the tabs at the top, you just click on them to choose between what feature you're looking at. So for revenue and balance, there's a drop-down menu for the PSAP. If you only have one PSAP, that'll automatically be populated for you. But keep in mind, if you do represent more than one, you'll want to make sure you're on the correct PSAP that you're entering the revenue and balance for. And so these are just text boxes for the web form. When you hover over the text box, you'll see the help pop up, which is handy dandy. And Scott, if you want us to add that bit about if the funds were combined, enter that total in the landline fund, we can add that bit of help in there if you want. So I'm just going to start entering in I know $1 is a real bargain, but I'm just going to enter just a number in so we can see what happens after I hit save here. So open $1, and then I'll enter some interest too. $1, okay. So, okay, I feel like those are my totals I want to enter for revenue and balance. So I'm just going to hit save. Okay, so first thing it does is it prompts me and says, is the total revenue you're entering is $3. So the total revenue is a calculation of the interest, the current year 911 funds received, and the other reimbursement fields. So that's kind of just a way to do a quick check that your calculations added up to what you wanted them to. So if I'm happy with that, I'll go and say OK. and you'll see the page reload because as I start putting entries in, a table appears at the bottom. So the neat thing about this is every time you enter a new revenue, let me just do another one here so you can see how the table starts adding more information. You'll kind of have a table and a run. You'll be able to. It's kind of like in a way like a spreadsheet, because every time you enter something in, you save it. It'll double check your calculation for you, and then you'll see another entry in the table below. The neat thing about this table, all the information you're entering goes into a database behind the scenes here. So we're able to query it or pull that information for Scott however he needs. And the table is interactive. If you represented more than one PSAP, you can click on any of the field headers, and that would sort for you. Same thing with any of the field headers here. If you want to sort by total or current year fees, other, any of these, you can just keep clicking down, and once you click on it, it'll sort ascending or descending as you prefer all the way through here. So it's kind of nice. You can see the date you entered it in and kind of interactively look at the different information. If you decide you've entered something that wasn't quite right, or you want to change that one, you can select a record just by highlighting it. See how it turns blue there? And you can say you want to delete that selected record. So then you can remove it and say, yeah, that one wasn't right, or I want to re-enter it later, so I'm going to remove that at this time. One feature that Kelly is working on, we just time-wise didn't have time to get that all in there, is the ability to be able to edit a record after you've inputted it. That was just another whole branch of development and programming that needed to happen. So that's an enhancement we're working on. It just isn't available at this time. So at this time, if you have an error, you just have to delete that record and re-enter it. So a few more features on the revenue and balance page at the bottom. Once you have, several things entered, you might want to actually be able to look at that in a Excel spreadsheet or print it out or something like that. So you can click the Export CSV button, and that'll reload and then give you the option to click. It'll say Revenue and Balance Spreadsheet is ready. You may download it here. By clicking on that link, you can see it started downloading the file. And then if I just say go and open that, of course it'll only have one record in there, but you'll see you'll be opening up what you've entered in a simple spreadsheet that you can then change the field headings or sort or print or whatever you want to do to actually have a copy for yourself. You can also click on another option is PDF by PSAP. So if you have a single PSAP, this might not have as much information as maybe if Scott needs to see all of them by PSAP. But again, it just does the simple calculation, gives you the PSAP, the information you've entered, as well as some running totals at the bottom. So this is really handy, especially if you've entered, 10, 20 revenue and balance totals, to be able to export out in a spreadsheet so you can sort and look at it yourself, or a PDF if you just need a quick print off of what you've entered. This is an easy way to do that. So just a couple options there. And that does open in a separate tab. So when I clicked on that PDF by PSAP, it actually opened this tab for that information. Just so keep that in mind. That's kind of how that operates there. Oh, sure. And Kelly had something she wanted to add about browsers.
Well, we've had some users indicate that in Internet Explorer 11 that PDF tab is not opening, and I researched it a little bit, and it's a known issue between Adobe and Internet 11. You might just try Googling it yourself, and there's a couple different workarounds or fixes out there, but I do think it's an issue between Adobe and Internet Explorer, so I'm not sure what can be done on our end programming-wise. Some users that I read about said that they went back a version of Adobe software and reinstalled the Adobe Reader. So you might just research it a little bit or talk to your IT person and see what they recommend. But so far of all the browsers, that's been the only issue with the PDFs is Internet Explorer 11.
And I should point out I'm using Chrome for the demo today. So if you have the opportunity that if it's not working in Internet Explorer and you have access to Chrome or another browser, you might just try it in another browser and it might work for you there as well. So thanks. That's a good point, Kelly, for bringing that up. Okay, so this is, like I said, you lost. Oh, sure, go ahead.
Eileen, one thing I would point out, on the pre-911 Act balances,
okay,
you only need to enter those one time. Otherwise, it's going to, if you enter them every time, it's going to keep adding that to your total. So you only need to enter it the one time.
Okay, that's good. That's what, yeah. I understand the form, but maybe not the content behind it. So thank you for that input. That's very important. And again, if we find there's some other things that are helpful to add in this help pop-up field, we can do that as well. So that's good feedback. Okay. Okay, Scott, anything else on the revenue and balance tab?
I think that does it. Obviously, it's up to you whether, as the expenditure reporter, it's up to you whether you do that monthly as you get your payments in, or whether you just wait until the end of the year when you're getting ready to do your expenditure report. You can do all of your revenue for the year one time on this tab.
Okay, great. Well, let's go on to expenditures. So hopefully the tabbed look of this kind of feels like your spreadsheet you were using beforehand. Thought it'd be easy to click between them, just like in your Excel spreadsheet. So the next one I'm going to cover is expenditures. Similar kind of feel. There's the first is the date. Actually, Scott, did you want to talk about each of the fields before I go into the functionality?
I think why don't you just walk through the functionality, and as we get to fields that may need a little bit of explanation, I'll just jump in.
Okay, super. Okay, so the first thing is the date field, which is supposed to be actually the invoice date of your expense. And it'll prompt you if you, it prefers the format to have dashes between the month, date, and the year. And if you enter it with slashes or some other way, it'll prompt you upon save to reformat it. That just helps keep things happy in the database behind the scenes to have it consistent. I guess one of the first things before you start entering information is making sure you have the right type selected. So this again is similar to the tabs in your spreadsheet, whether it's a reoccurring cost contracts, an equipment, training, or other. So depending on which radio button you select, that's the category or type that this expense will be entered under. So once you select that, let's just say I'm doing an equipment expense today, you want to make sure you have the right date. So I'll say, okay, yeah, this is one for, let's say January 1st, might as well, 2016. And then you'll go to your amount of that expense. And then further down, at this time, vendors is just a free text field. So if anything, we're going to try to put together some sort of a drop-down list, but not knowing all the vendors, that was kind of impossible for us. So if you could just be consistent in your vendor name, that would help with any of the queries behind the scenes. If you're entering, I don't know, AT&T, just always enter it the same way, and that way it'll just make your reports look consistent and everything in the database look consistent as well. So speaking of that, I'll just make that my vendor today. So my vendor is AT&T. And again, I represent a single PSAP since I'm Chris, so I'm just don't have to do anything there. And then the fund, you have the option of post-911 Act funds or pre-911 Act funds. And here's a little pop-up there for the help with that. I think Scott talked about that a little bit already. So be sure and select the appropriate fund for that expense. Oops, trying to click off that. Okay. And then allowable use. So there's a little help button here that will actually take you to the frequently asked questions about allowable uses on the council's website. So this is handy dandy in case you're like, oh, okay, what was the use I needed for that, or what, a particular question you might have. So that links you right to this frequently asked questions page to hopefully get your answer for you. Okay, and if I go back to allowable use, so that helps us select the statutory allowed use relating to the expenditures. So there's a drop-down list. Just go through and select what you're looking for. Since my type was equipment, I'm going to say I was purchasing 911 equipment upgrades. Okay, and so for the description and comments, you would put some information here, describing the expenditure. For the demo, I'm just going to put test, so Kelly can remove this from Chris's records later. And then in comments, this is a nice way to provide some further information. If there's some other details you want to make sure you have related to expense, it's a text filter, so you can put some more information in there as well. I'll put test there. Okay, so if I look things over, I feel like I've got my expense ready. You'll see before I even enter this that there's some running totals going at the bottom here of information Chris has already entered. So it's showing his PSAP, Reno Hutchison. He has a running total for reoccurring cost contracts, and so far I'll be the first one to enter anything for equipment, nothing for training yet, and others. So once I hit save here, it'll reload, and you'll see now that I entered an expense. I now have a running total for equipment. I'm sorry, for equipment, running total for equipment down at the bottom as well. That's kind of a nice way to kind of see at a quick glance what your totals are ongoing. If you scroll further down the page, so that's the actual entry part, then we go back to the table part of things. Kelly's added several filter options here at the top. So let's see, Chris has quite a few expenses put in already. But let's say he's like, well, I'm looking for one in particular. How can I just get to that quickly? I want to look at just that equipment expense I've put in so far. You can filter by equipment, and it'll show you just that one. So it's kind of a quick look at different categories in the expenses. Back to all to look at all of them. If you're like, okay, I just want to look at how many I have entered for purchase of 911 equipment upgrades, again, it'll filter that for you and show you just that one. So those are kind of nice handy-dandy ways just to be able to quickly look for a record without having to search through entries. So you can do the same thing with funds used, and also if you needed to, if you had more than one PSAP and you needed to filter through and look at just one in particular. So same as the revenue and balance page, you can use the table headers to sort the table. So you just click on it. Let's see, I'm going to search. I want to look at which vendors I have so far. So if I click on that, it's sorted alphabetically for me, so I can quickly scroll through. It's another way if you're looking for something and look and see, oh, there's the Windstream one I was looking for, and look for something in particular. So again, all of the fields are sortable. Just another quick way to be able to look for a particular piece of information. Again, if you entered a record, which I don't want to click on that one, entered a record and you're like, oh, I didn't mean to enter that. Let's see, let me sort my date. I guess I could just go ahead and get rid of the one I entered. So Chris is like, okay, I entered this, but that's not quite right, or I need to change something about that. And if you click on that record, you can hit delete selected expenditures and remove that, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. I want to make sure I don't have anything else of Chris's, so I'm going to make sure I've clicked that one, click delete select expenditure, and then that one is removed. So it takes you back. You got to click back on the expenditures page to get back to where you were. Okay. Okay, so there's kind of the ongoing entry of all of the expenditures you've entered. A few more buttons at the bottom this time. You can again export as a CSV. So same thing will happen. It'll reload, and it'll prompt you to click here to download. Go and do that and open that up so you can see the spreadsheet. Again, just a simple spreadsheet with all the field headings that are applicable. So you can reformat, resort however you want, but nice way to have, again, a copy for yourself if you'd like of the data you've entered. A few more options. Since there's quite a bit more information going into the expenditures, you can click on PDF by vendor, and that'll create a simple PDF showing you all the vendors and those costs associated. And same thing for PDF by PSAP. If you represented more than one PSAP, that might be useful, or PDF by use. Same type of thing. So it's just creating a quick report for you based on a particular need. So you might want to be able to maybe you've entered by vendor or by use, or if you want to see everything, you can just export to an Excel spreadsheet and do some sorting and printing or viewing however you want with that option. And again, at this time you can't edit an entry, but you can delete it and re-enter it, and we'll be working on that. We don't really have a timeline on that, but it will be enhancement. If it's not, by the deadline this year, we'll certainly have it in before expenses and revenues are in for next year. So we'll be working on that. Okay, so that was expenditures. Anything else you want to add on expenditures tab, Scott?
Yeah, let me jump in there.
Sure.
Some of you do your reporting on an annual basis rather than doing it by month or by day or by week, however. If you're doing it as an annual thing and you're taking all of your recurring costs to a telephone service provider and you're making that as one entry for the full year, on your invoice date, just use like December 31st of the year that you're reporting for the invoice date on that. And you can aggregate those and report them just one time for the full amount. The other two fields that I would point out are that description and comments field. The better description and comments that you put with an expenditure, the less likely you are to hear from the operations committee when they review this. If it's clear what the money was expended for, they're not going to ask you for further information in the vast majority of cases. So those two fields are going to save you some headache if you fill them out with good information there to explain what the expenditure is.
Scott, this is Michelle.
I think that's all I've got to add.
This is Michelle. I just wanted to add that if you have, the example would be like AT&T as a vendor, and you get 3 separate bills from them, and there may be 2 different descriptions on those bills, don't aggregate those as one total. Go ahead and keep those out. My example would be is I have my monthly recurring phone costs, but I also have a T1 line that I pay for my radio infrastructure. So I won't aggregate those together because I want to ensure that those are different expenses. I mean, they're expenses, but they're defined differently. So I wouldn't aggregate all my AT&T into one total.
Hurry up.
Good point.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott, Michelle. And then the final tab I wanted to talk about is annual submission. So we just recently added this in case you've logged in and hadn't seen this particular tab yet. We got to thinking that we realized once you're done entering your expenses for the year, we needed some way to notify Scott and Michelle that your expenses were done and you're ready for submission. So all this page does is once you have completed your expenses for the year, you just click on the appropriate year that you want to submit and notify Scott and Michelle for. So once you hit click and save, and I won't do it for Chris because it'll lock out his 2015 expenditures. What that does is it simply sends an email to Scott and Michelle and lets them know that your expenses are submitted and ready for review. So it's just a way to signify you're complete, as well as let Scott and Michelle know that you're complete and your expenses are ready for review. So that's really your final step. After you've gone through and entered your revenue and balance and expenditures, getting close to, I think Scott said, March 1st is the deadline. Getting close to that, you'll just want to make sure you click that and save that and submit it so they're aware that your expenditures are complete.
But once you click that 2015 expenditures and hit save, for some reason, if you forgot something, you can't go back and fix it, or you can?
You can at this the prompt it shows you is kind of a thank you for any of your expenditures. If you realize you have some corrections or changes, to contact Scott at that point in time. So it was kind of a way we're trying to figure out to kind of roll you to the next year. But that doesn't mean that Scott can call us and say, oh, this BSAP need to enter a few more expenses, and then so that you could go back in and we could just basically uncheck that for you, like you haven't submitted them all, and then you could enter some more and then resubmit again. So everything's fixable. It's just a matter of that was really just a way to notify Scott and Michelle that you're complete. So.
Okay, thank you.
Eileen, it's also helpful for us to know that we have the final version. Without that piece, we wouldn't know that people weren't going back in and changing it. So it's a checks and balances, so we know that we have the most up-to-date version.
Okay, great. Yeah, okay. So really, those are the steps involved for entering expenditures. I guess the heavy lifting is getting logged in and registered, and then getting approved, and then going ahead and entering expenditures. After you've created your account, if at any time you decide you needed to update some information, you can always go to your user profile and update that information here. So if you needed to change your address or phone number or anything like that, you can do that at this point too. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So I think, Scott, Michelle, if you had any other information you want to share, if you wanted to open it up for questions, I'll let you guys decide, but that's really the bulk of the demo I wanted to share today.
Very good. Michelle, do you have anything that you want to add?
No, I think we're good. Although, can you clarify again on the pre-911? You made a statement, and I didn't quite catch it. You made a statement about if you have them or combined, where you wanted that to sit.
Yeah, if you have pre-911 Act funds that were not kept in separate account, landline and wireless, they're all combined into one account. Report that in the landline fund balance, pre-911 Act landline fund balance box.
Okay.
Can I
Hey,
ask
Scott,
a
this is
question on
Mark.
that while
Your
you're
ending fund
talking
balance December 31st, 2015, that you don't put anything in there, is that correct?
One more time, Mark. Two of you were asking a question at the same time, and I didn't catch it.
Okay, on your ending fund balance, it says December 31st, 2015. You don't put anything in that block or box. Is that what you said?
Yeah, that's correct. That's a calculation that combines all of the other boxes on the field into that one.
And so, like
field.
Michelle was saying, if you didn't keep your cell and your landline funds separate, and you just put them all into the current fund, do you have to put the current fund balance somewhere? Is that what you're saying? You put it in landline, or what do you do with that current fund balance?
That was my question as well. Where does everything prior to 2015 go? Like 2014 ending balance, 13.
And you're absolutely right. The 911 fund balance box there, you should enter as of 2014, because that's going to add your current years to that amount. Is that correct, Kelly?
I think at this time the 911 fund balance was just an open field, not doing calculations, but we can reconfigure that.
Okay, so if I put an amount in that 911 fund balance box, will that add to the other boxes, the other fields on the form for my total balance?
There are no calculations on that box. I wasn't aware that that was a calculated field. The only calculated field, if you notice in the table below, that total field, that was the total of the interest, the current, and the other. So that total, the first field, I'm pointing at the screen, you can't see me.
all moving around.
That field is a calculation of those three boxes. I was not aware that the 911 fund balance was a calculated field, so I was expecting the user to put a number in there. I can change that to be a calculated field that adds up all of the boxes on this page. If that's how it's supposed to be.
I think Mark points out how wrong I totally was on that. We should have.
You're not going to have your fund carryover. So if you didn't spend all your 911 funds for the year, then how are you going to know what your fund balance is?
You're absolutely right, Mark. So that's the 911 fund balance should be as of 12/31 of 2014. What your balance was, then your current year's fees received goes in that box. Any interest and any other. And then those four boxes should be combined for your total field down below.
Scott, this is Emma. On the pre-911 Act, the spreadsheets that we've sent you in the years past, like last year's, we gave you a balance of what we had on hand then and then the year before that. So why would we put that in there? We need to put that amount in there again that we've already sent you? Because we just got our...
You do?
Go ahead.
You do, because you might have made expenditures out of that.
Okay.
So that balance would change year to year, or potentially did.
So we just put in I guess that's, so I got to go back to before 2012 and find out what our balance was then?
You should be able to just check with your treasurer.
I can do that. That's what I'm...
If you've kept those accounts, segregated, she should be able to tell you what your balance is as of the end of the year.
Right, but I mean, you were saying the pre-911 Act to be anything before 2012? Is that right?
Right, and only if you've kept those funds in separate accounts. If you've kept those funds segregated from your funds that you've received after January 1st of 2012, then you'll have balances in those accounts. If you just lumped all the money into one account, then you don't have pre-911 Act funds, and you don't have to worry about reporting anything there.
Okay. Thank you.
So will this form change and go into showing 12/31/2014 then? For the 911 fund balance?
Yeah, we'll get that update.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the way we had it, we had two separate funds, and then in January of 2012, we combined it all. So we would just put the 2014 fund balance, and then this current, for 2015, the 911 fees received.
Correct.
Okay.
Scott, I don't want to muddy the waters, but I want it to be clear for everybody that's on the line when we get done. If they were to combine those and put them in the landline fund rather than the wireless is more severe in language or is more strict in its uses. If they're to put it in landline, that opens that wide up, and that could be expenditures that are not allowable under the definition. Does that make sense?
Well, like we did in Pratt County, Michelle, we just put our wireless money into our new 911 funds that we started receiving after 2012 because it was more strict on your expenditures. So that's what I did, and that way you're not. But if didn't
I'm just saying, if you had pre-wireless and pre-landline and you didn't break them out, put them all in landline, then some could err in spending it a total dollar amount in on expenditures that are not allowed based on the 2012 language. I mean, because you couldn't, and I'm just going to throw it out there, you couldn't buy radios you could with the landline, but you couldn't with the wireless. And if you lump them all together in landline, then you could inadvertently be spending it on unallowable expenditures. So I was just concerned that might confuse them.
And
Scott?
You're absolutely right. I mean, the PSAP is responsible for expending those funds appropriately, but there's really nobody checking to see that they are.
That's true. I'm not sure I have a separate wireless back then.
Hey, Scott.
We never reported it on our old reports, did we, Scott? Those are fund balances from pre?
No, that is new this year, asking for those balances. And basically what we're trying to do is just get a picture of how much money do we have on hand.
Well, the expectation of it's the expectation of the operations group to understand when someone annually reports that they're spending pre-act landline numbers or dollars, that eventually that fund has to be depleted and goes away. And without a balance there, you can't ever track that, and that makes it difficult for post-legislative audits. Because there's no longer any revenue ever going in that line item, eventually it has to deplete, and we never had a dollar number there to show post-legislative audit where the begin point is and the end point is.
Scott?
Yes.
I had another question. If I remember right on our other expenditures when we did in the previous years, there was also a place for expenditures for 911 that came out of other funds. Like if you didn't have the money to replace equipment and it had to come from the sheriff's budget or another place, is there not a place to record that?
There is not, and you're right. Last year we asked you to tell us how much non-911 money you spent for 911, and we will probably do that again, but that will be a separate effort from this expenditure reporting, and that basically will only be requested if it's needed for the FCC report and the 911 profile database report. And I haven't got the information on that as to whether we're going to need to collect that this year or not.
Because my concern is that these fees aren't going to be enough to cover some of these smaller PSAPs for equipment that needs upgraded and updone and redone, if they're not going to be able to see those numbers to be able to raise fees.
Agreed.
Yes.
So, I mean, I just had to buy a recorder that I had to take out of two other funds to pay for it.
Okay.
It should have been all 911.
Well, we will capture that data because you're absolutely right. We need to see a picture of what we're truly spending on 911. So we will capture that outside of the portal and.
Or do we just put it in and show negative balances on this report?
My concern with that is that if we try and combine that reporting with this reporting, that we have the potential to have expenditures that end up in our expenditure report to the legislature that aren't truly 911 fee expenditures.
Right, meaning they don't meet an allowable use or meet the categories of the statute. Is that what you're clarifying?
Yeah, that and if you don't get that fund changed, then you end up showing a 911 expenditure that was not 911 funds. If we're mixing the two here.
I think what we could do is we could make it a totally separate report, and we could still put it on the portal, and we could put, exactly, what allowable expenses really are into that report, but show the budget that's coming out of general funds, and then keep that report separate. That would be clean and easy and make it easy the next time we go and ask for a fee increase.
But if my monthly current reoccurring costs and the equipment that I've replaced for the year have went over the amount that I've received on 911 fees, how are they going to see that? If I'm just going to go ahead and pay it out of my general fund or pull it from the sheriff's budget or wherever, how are they going to see that we're not getting enough funds to pay for the equipment and the fees that we have?
Well, it would just be in this separate report that we were talking about. Go ahead and creating a second report, and it would be the two together, but the data would be kept separate. Legislatively, by statute, the council is required to oversee your expenditures and income on the 911 fund, but we have no purview or oversight of your general fund. So I think we would have to keep those separate, but have the data to be able to combine.
So if I have to pay a fee or an expense for a piece of equipment or a monthly cost out of 911 for trunks and data or whatever, and it has to come out of a general fund, they don't want to see that I've paid that for a 911 expenditure? Other than on a separate report?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And the way that we report that to the legislature is through our annual legislative report that we submit to them. And we did in this year's report, we will in next year's report, show the true amount, the amount above and beyond what's expended from 911 fees that goes to support 911. And we will make that case to them, and we will use that data as we try and work to get the 911 fee.
I understand what all of you are saying, but I think Bill has a valid point here that we're by creating a separate report, it seems like it would be very easy for that to be swept aside and ignored over the information here. I mean, I think all he's asking for is to have a category there for, like you said, general fund or something like that for that money to show that he spent that money. I think with your other checks and balances, the concerns about people spending the money illegally, as it were, I think are not really valid. If they're showing that they're coming out of the same categories as the 911 money, but that's just general fund, I kind of tend to agree with Bill that maybe that's the better way to do this.
But again, my concern is if you report an expenditure out of general fund for an allowable use and you don't get that single drop-down box for fund changed correctly, then we have commingled the expenditure of 911 funds with the expenditure of general fund money, and then we've totally lost lost track of the expenditure of 911 funds that we have to, by statute, report back to the legislature.
And this is Michelle again, and my biggest concern is when we first started doing this, we have a lot of pushback on the oversight, and we need to stay within the boundaries of what we're tasked and allowable to do within this specific report. Specific report captures exactly what we're obligated to. I'm not saying that the data is not needed and that it's not valuable. It is. And we all recognize the fact that we need to look at raising the fee. The point is that this is our statutory obligation, and I do think that has to stay separate. And the other issue is that a lot of the expenses, 100% of the usage is not 911, and then it becomes difficult to parse those out in this report.
This is Emma.
Any other? Yes, ma'am.
I was just wondering if, so we're back to, we need to do it separately then for the landline and the wireless, correct?
Well, what we've been discussing here is general fund money that's expended for 911. So
right.
Things like personnel, equipment, basically any of those categories, but you're using out of the general fund budget as opposed to using 911 fee money for those expenditures.
Yes, I got that. Okay.
So when do you think the 911 fund balance will be changed to 2014?
We'll get that done
Kelly,
today.
Okay.
She just said today, so I'm just speaking for her. I'll let you let her talk. Yeah.
Well, I'm good to go until I get to actually doing it. Then we'll see what happens.
That's me too.
Is it my understanding that once you check the completed and submit box, so if I want to go back next year and look at the previous years, I won't be able to do that?
Kelly, that's a question for you.
Well, right now there aren't any filters by date. You know, if you go to that expenditures tab, all those filters at the top, how you can filter by vendor, and
right.
We could put a date filter there, so if you only wanted to see 2015, you could. We haven't talked about keeping the years separate right now. That might be something that we talk about with Scott and Michelle, but right now it's just all going into the same table and the same database. So the short-term solution would be to add a filter. And you could, and maybe another report button that if you wanted to see the PDF report of just 2016 or just 2015, then you could do that. But right now they're all going in the same table.
Okay.
So Scott, this is just me brainstorming, but could we duplicate this report exactly and like maybe make the tabs all red and keep it totally separate but within the same sign-on and title that one General Fund and make that a voluntary submission? So it would be separate, but separate but same, and they could report it at the same time. But it would have to have the same exact drop-downs because, wouldn't it?
Well, other than we'd probably want to add personnel as a type.
Right.
Because that's obviously the big one coming out of general fund that directly relates to 911 that 911 funds don't touch at all.
Right. I'm just saying I see the need that we must keep it clean and tight, but I also see their their need to report, but there's no obligation to report, so we'd have to really define that it's voluntary.
Right.
Yeah, Michelle, to
I
that
think that would be it.
One other idea on that, and it may be a bad one, would be simply to add one more box there that says amount on this expenditure covered by other funds or by general fund or something like that.
I think, at least for the behind the scenes, the web form and table part of that, any of those are doable. It's just whatever you think would be the cleanest way to keep those amounts separated, but still allow a way for them to be reported. So definitely something we could talk about. If you want, Scott, Michelle, we can meet with you soon to discuss that and figure out the best way to implement that and get that integrated.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Sounds good to me.
Scott?
Yes.
Scott, this is Bill. I've got a question on what would you do as far as the reporting goes if it's an allowable expense and you split the cost between 911 funds and, say, the general fund?
That's exactly what my question was.
Well,
so do you report the amount expended, but then the invoice doesn't match?
Well, Scott, here's the deal. I just bought a recorder, $63,000 recorder, and I could only I paid for half of it from 911 funds and the other half out of the general fund.
Okay. So
I mean, when I go to report that I bought the phone recorder, it's only going to show. I only show half of the expense of the phone recorder since the other half was paid out of the general fund.
And that's in this report, you would report just the 911 funds that you expended. And then I think the way to perhaps to handle this is to add a fourth tab to this reporting form up here at the top that shows general fund expenditures, and we will put a disclaimer at the top that it's totally voluntary if you want to report that or not. Perhaps the reason why it would be beneficial if you did report it, and then that way we collect that expenditure data from general fund as well, but we keep it totally separate from the expenditures of 911 fund that we have to report back to the legislature.
And Bill, this is Michelle, and there are invoices that I have that we have made arrangements that there's like a 60-40 split. Like on our CAD, 911 doesn't pay 100% of all the CAD costs because there's a benefit to other departments. So 911 pays 40% of the CAD, and 60% is split by other departments. So my invoice on it is detailed out 60-40, and I only submit in my 911 expenditure exactly what I've spent out of my 911 fund.
Okay. Then another question would be if you do this voluntary submission or whatever, are you going to want to break out, because we split the cost between a lot of the costs between the city and the county? How will that work? Because I don't have access to city numbers. I only have access to county numbers, financials.
Well, that's why I'm so hesitant to commingle these, is because there are a lot of those that you can't see the true cost because it's embedded in a larger contract, or it's been absorbed. Yeah, so that's why clearly we are only requiring by statute what the 911 fee is being spent on. It doesn't mean we don't need to capture those, and those aren't valuable and needed data when we're looking at fee increases. It's very difficult for some to break those out.
This is Emma, and on that note, city is paying us a portion to cover our 911 costs for like our new 911 system. So where would I put that in this, or would I not?
Is it coming out of your 911 fee?
I
Are
wouldn't.
you writing a check out of your 911 fee?
Talking
No.
about revenue to 911?
Yes. Yes, I'm talking about revenue. The city is paying some to us for the use of our dispatch. So that would be part of 911, correct?
Reimbursement.
And so it would be
where is the money coming from?
The city.
But is it coming out of their general fund, or is it coming out of?
I have no idea.
Well,
I
They're
have no
paying
idea.
the PSAP for a monthly or yearly fee.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, who receives the
it would be
911
coming out
money?
of their general fund because they don't receive any 911 funds.
Well, no,
But
just
that,
like here in Minneapolis.
that amount would not go into the revenue
Okay.
report because that is solely 911 funds.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I mean, that's probably something. I mean, that's a whole nother ball of wax
Sorry.
to try and deal with.
Sorry, I just wanted to
Because-
make sure because I know that there might be another part of our county that may have to pay some in too to cover for 911 dispatch stuff. And I just want to make sure that I'm covering all the bases. But if I don't worry about it, I'm not going to.
And,
Well, and I'm
and
making
it wouldn't be reported as revenue for the annual expenditure report.
Okay.
I agree
But
with you. This is going to be a problem because we also receive yearly fees from a police department to dispatch for them for the part of that, and we don't know where to put it.
But
Yeah,
do you have
and-
budget authority?
And that,
Say again?
My question was, is most of us do, but that goes back into the general fund, and you don't get budget authority over it. It's a reimbursement back to your city or to your general fund, but it doesn't annual budget authority. So Scott's exactly correct. It wouldn't be depicted on this report whatsoever.
okay, anybody have any other questions before we wrap up here?
Nope.
Nope. I don't think so.
All righty. Well, if you have any problems as you start working through it, let me know, and I'll get you with Kelly, and she can fix your problems.
That's funny.
And thanks
Passing the
again
buck there.
Thanks
Scott,
again to
where
Crystal.
will we find the link for the recording of this?
It will be published out on the Kansas911.org website.
Thank
And
you, sir.
I can send out a link to it once we get it up on the website as well.
Appreciate it.
All
Thank
righty.
you guys.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.